Here on our channel, people's stories come to life. Stories from different eras, professions, and destinies. Each of them follows their own path, their own life woven from circumstances, challenges, and choices. Before we step into their world, make sure to subscribe, and later, share your impressions in the comments. Now, let's begin. Some stories don't start with loud events. They start small, with details, with moments that seem insignificant, yet hold entire worlds within them. These are stories about people who never chose to be heroes. They simply lived, worked, made mistakes, learned from them, and kept moving forward. The lives of such people unfold like a slowly blooming flower, each petal revealing itself in its own time, each layer hiding new secrets, new pains, new joys. This is a story from a time when the world was just a little different. Morning in the Arsenal Quarter begins not with bells, but with the scrape of oars against wood. The houses lean close over the water there, patched with salt and memory. A pale mist drifts up from the canal, softening the edges of broken walls. Within the first weak light, the gondolier's mother mends her nets, her hands blackened from tar. She hums without noticing, a slow rhythm that matches the tug of her thread. Her son listens while handling scraps of wood, carving them into small hulls. The air smells of smoke from kitchens, wet hemp, and fish scales left from the night before. He grows among workers who rarely speak of beauty, but live surrounded by it. To him, the city is a floating chest of sounds. Bells from San Pietro, hammer strikes from shipbuilders, the laughter of foreign sailors who drink too early. The boy learns the language of echoes. He can tell which bridge a voice comes from, and whether the tide hides under the stone or pulls away. What others feel as noise becomes his compass. By midday, the arsenal fills with clang and fire. Men in coarse shirts drive nails through planks that will become the backs of ships for nations richer than their own. Some sing. Most work in silence. The boy's father, a patient boat builder, teaches him how to read the grain of timber, how the knots can betray weakness, how an oar that hums too softly will crack before winter ends. "Wood behaves like men," his father tells him once. "It lasts longer when kept honest and dry." The boy remembers those words even when he does not yet understand them. In the evenings, he helps carry planks to the canal edge, his bare feet slippery with resin. The setting sun paints every puddle gold. Sometimes he watches older boys practice steering their gondolas, proud and loud, mocking each other in the dialect of the poor. They talk of nobles, of the endless feasts and masked balls they see only from afar. He listens, smiling, but his attention drifts to the slow pattern of ripples, the quiet authority of the water. Food is plain: beans, bread when it can be spared, a strip of salted sardine. Tables are narrow and shared by too many elbows. Yet laughter still fits inside. His mother likes to tease his father for falling asleep before finishing his wine. There is warmth in such small jokes, the kind that turns hunger into company. The boy feels safe in those moments and stores the sensation deep inside, an unnoticed treasure. He befriends another child, a fragile one who limps slightly when running. This boy spends his days sketching the city's roofs with bits of charcoal. He dreams of becoming a painter, though his family can barely afford soap. Sometimes they sit side by side on the wharf, watching the colored sails come and go. The painter boy says that Venice looks different from every window, always itself, yet never the same. The gondolier-to-be listens and wonders if that is what growing means, seeing the same world, but finding a new meaning each day. Years pass in that rhythm of work, tide, and small hopes. He learns to handle a pole, to balance on the narrow edge of a boat, to sing quietly when alone. His body grows strong but not proud. He hides kindness as others hide wealth, doing favors in silence, returning a lost ring to a washerwoman, repairing a neighbor's bench at night so that no one needs to thank him. It seems safer that way. Praise from others makes him uneasy. Debts of gratitude weigh more than money. When storms sweep the lagoon, his mother lights a candle and whispers to the Virgin, not out of piety, but precaution. Many believe that spirits swim in the dark water during those nights, sailors' souls unable to rest. No one rows then, unless hunger demands it. Once, during such a storm, he runs outside to tie down a floating barrel. The lightning flashes, revealing faces carved in stone at the corners of old houses. For a heartbeat, he thinks one of them watches him. He laughs at his own fear later, but the memory clings, a reminder that the city keeps its own secrets. Work replaces childhood. He begins to ferry small loads for craftsmen, planks, sacks of lime, the occasional passenger too poor to hire a proper gondolier. He charges little and never cheats on the fare. When asked why, he shrugs. The lagoon knows who cheats. People repeat it afterward, half in jest, half in faith. It becomes his quiet reputation, a boy who rows straight and talks little. The painter boy sickens in one damp winter. Fevers come and go, and the small house smells of vinegar and wet sheets. The gondolier sits by his friend's side when the others sleep, holding his rough hand. The painter whispers a wish to capture Venice as it truly is, before illness steals his strength. He dies before spring, leaving behind a few sketches, crooked roofs, the margin of a canal, a figure rowing into mist. The loss leaves the young gondolier hollow, but wiser. He keeps one of the drawings, folded inside his shirt for years. It teaches him what his father's words only hinted. Nothing built by hands escapes the water eventually, but some things, like kindness and memory, float longer than expected. Afterward, silence deepens around him. He works harder, speaks less. Yet his eyes become more observant, sharper. He notices how the reflections under bridges change color before rain, or how merchants exchange glances that carry more than their words. The city, once a playground, now feels like a living map of bargains and betrayals. Still he rows. Day after day the oar finds rhythm, the hull slides smooth. He treats each journey as a contract between man and water. One must trust the other. Once a noble woman drops her fan into the canal near his boat. Without thinking, he dips the blade of his oar, fishing it out neatly. She thanks him briefly, presses a coin into his palm, and sails away behind curtains of silk. He stares at the coin, almost reluctant to keep it. What a strange city, he muses, where a piece of silver weighs more than a word. By the time he reaches the edge of adulthood, Venice around him seems both eternal and ready to crumble. Whole palaces shed plaster like snow. Bridges lean awkwardly against their own shadows. Yet he feels something durable beneath it all. The endurance of labor, the rhythm of rowing, the courage of those who mend rather than build anew. These are his people, his inheritance. Sometimes, under the quiet of night, he dreams that the lagoon speaks, not with voice, but with reflection. The stars on the surface tremble as if weighed by invisible truths. When he wakes, he carries that image into the day, a private emblem of balance, the fragile peace between what sinks and what stays afloat. The fog lifts slowly from the Grand Canal, revealing a glimmer of slate water and gilded domes blurred in the thin morning light. Our gondolier stands beside his boat, rubbing the handle of his oar with oil from a little bottle given by his father. The gondola gleams black, freshly tarred, its metal prow curved like an eyelash of iron. Nearby, voices rise, traders haggling, children shouting about deliveries from Dalmatia, the smell of coffee drifting from an open window. Venice hums awake, alive yet tired, proud yet cautious of its own grandeur. He is a man now, grown into the shape of the city. His arms are steady, his shoulders sculpted by years at the oar. He earns his bread ferrying merchants, lovers, and nobles through the web of canals where secrets flow faster than water. Among gondoliers, reputation floats higher than rank. Skill and silence are coin. He has both. He rows neatly, never speaking unless addressed, never overcharging, never prying. Lawmen and smugglers alike trust him for that very reason. By late afternoon, when the tide turns warm and slow, the lagoon fills with echoes of laughter from balconies. Musicians tune their violins for evening gatherings, and masked carriages rattle across bridges. The gondolier watches them from below, amused. He knows that by night, most masks return with tear stains under their paint. Venice pretends. The gondolier rows. That is the order of things. In the tavern near San Barnaba, where he eats a bowl of beans and drinks thin wine, the talk tonight is of taxes and spies. A stranger at the next table says that the Austrians want to swallow Venice whole. Another argues that it is not politics one should fear, but hunger. Someone mutters about drowned omens, a dead gull found floating near the arsenal. The gondolier listens without joining in. His humor, once bright as the sound of a wave hitting stone, has turned drier over the years. A shrug answers where words would do harm. Still, when a harpist begins to play near the door, he taps the rhythm against the side of his cup, smiling faintly. Among gondoliers, there is a code older than law. Watch the water, and it will warn you. They believe that sudden ripples in still canals mean the city remembers a betrayal, that a boat rocking without wind carries a soul that refuses rest. He does not mock them. Superstition here is only another form of caution. Those who dismiss it are often found unlucky. His small lodging overlooks a narrow canal behind a printmaker's shop. He shares the building with widows, apprentices, and an old violinist who plays until dawn. When he returns home after work, his hands ache from damp wood, his back from the weight of the pole. Yet he feels something close to peace when the oar rests against the wall, gleaming faintly like a faithful companion. His world is built of repetition, washing, polishing, rowing. He measures time not by months but by wear, when the rope frays, when the shoes thin, when the body grows a trace slower to heal. And yet this life has subtle joys, A warm loaf bought on credit? The brief nod from a fellow rower passing in silence. The reflection of sunrise in black water. Venice may never notice him, but the lagoon does. One afternoon, near the Rialto, his eye catches movement on the quay. A woman, leaning too far over the edge, pointing at her father's merchant boat. The next second, the wood breaks under her feet. She plunges into the canal, her satin skirts spreading like a wounded bird. Before thought arrives, he thrusts his pole forward, balancing on the prow, and slips into the water. Cold shock grips his chest, but he pulls her up, gasping, to the surface. By the time others rush to help, she is already in his arms, shivering, half laughing from fright. The merchant, a stout man with rings on every finger, offers a heavy purse. The gondolier refuses politely. "Keep it," he says. "Your daughter's safe. The water wanted no one today." The father insists, offended by humility, but the gondolier steps back. Gratitude, when large, can bind like rope. He takes only an old copper coin from the ground, perhaps by accident, perhaps not, then touches his cap and rows away. Rumor travels faster than tide. By evening, the taverns speak of the gondolier who rescued a merchant's daughter. Praise follows him into corners he does not like. Some call him gallant, others say he's foolish to refuse payment. Friends tease him, but there is warmth underneath their laughter. Venice loves stories more than truth. He has become one for a night. When the sun dips behind the domes, lanterns sway above the canal. Gondolas line up for the evening routes, gliding like black swans under pink clouds. The gondolier works steadily. Couples whisper behind masks, believing his silence sacred. He studies their hands instead, how they clutch each other tighter as darkness falls. Sometimes he wonders whether love feels like rowing against the current or letting the current decide. After the city sleeps, he moors the boat and walks home. The air smells of wet marble and burnt wax. A street musician sings a verse about loneliness, his voice trembling like string over water. The gondolier pauses by a bridge to listen, head bent. For a moment, he feels every sound of Venice beating like another heart. Footsteps echoing, shutters closing, waves brushing against the quay. This is the city's tenderness, hidden behind its ornate cruelty. He keeps few possessions, an extra shirt, a small folding knife, the painter boy's drawing from his youth still tucked into a wooden box. Sometimes he unfolds it by candlelight. The paper has yellowed, the lines faded, but the little figure rowing into mist still looks alive. He smiles, seeing himself in it. People change, outlines remain. Work grows heavier with years. Tourists from across the sea begin to arrive with shining coins and strange accents. They want songs, not silence. He obliges when he can, humming softly of distant saints, of fishermen lost during Lent. Some cry quietly, thanking him for a voice they did not expect. It amuses him that his singing, meant only to fill emptiness between strokes, touches those who travel seas to find meaning. Once, after a late journey, he passes a floating procession, candles carried by priests on small boats, bells tolling across the water. The reflection of light turns the canal into a trembling corridor of gold. Many gondoliers stop to watch, joining their voices in rough prayer. He remains still, hands resting on the oar. There is something sacred in silence, too. When the last candle vanishes behind a bend, he feels the lagoon breathe again, relieved. Days fold into months, the rhythm steady, predictable. Yet beneath the calm surface, minor sorrows accumulate. He loses an old neighbor to fever. The violinist moves away. His laughter grows rarer. Still, a trace of mischief remains, in how he greets gulls that perch on his boat, in how he scolds the water when it splashes too high. Humor, after all, is a sailor's best armor. One cold evening near Carnival, he notices a mask floating along the canal, half submerged. It is of fine make, silver-painted, shaped like a bird with narrow eyes. He fishes it out, shakes off the water, and hangs it from his seat. The thing seems harmless, yet as the mist thickens, he feels uneasy, as though the mask were waiting for someone to claim it. He shrugs. Venice sheds faces often. The city is littered with forgotten identities. Still, he keeps it, polishing it absent-mindedly once in a while. On nights when the tide runs strangely high, he dreams of canals glowing white under the moon. In the dream, masked figures stand shoreline deep, whispering without sound. He rows among them, searching for a voice that might answer. When he wakes, dawn already filters through the window, coloring the wall pale blue. He wonders what the lagoon tries to tell him, and why the silence afterward feels expectant. That morning, he rows harder than usual, seeking to drown questions in motion. The oar creaks rhythmically. Drops of sunlight glitter on each ripple. The city's grandeur begins to peel like old paint, yet his work remains true. Balance, he knows, is earned each day anew, between pride and humility, hunger and honor. When he stops near the bridge of San Moise, a fellow gondolier calls from another boat, joking about the lonely mask he keeps tied to his seat. He laughs and says it brings him luck. The other man spits into the canal, saying luck is a fickle courtesan. Both chuckle and move on with the current. Venice stretches ahead, layered with sound and salt, promise and decay. He rows through it with the patience of one who belongs neither to the nobles nor to the beggars, just a man between the two, servant to the water, guardian of silence. And though he does not yet know it, the same mask resting by his feet carries the first whisper of a mystery waiting in fog. Night slides over Venice like a slow tide of ink. The canals grow still, their surfaces black and bright by turns under the moon. Lanterns sway from iron hooks, their light trembling on wet stone. From every doorway, faint laughter or song escapes, remnants of carnival clinging to the air. Masks drift through the streets even now, though the festivities have ended days ago. In this city, disguise is not a season, but a habit. The gondolier waits beside his moored boat near Santa Fosca, cap pulled low, coat tight against the chill. It is an hour when most oars rest, and only the sound of distant water can be heard. Fog presses close, smelling faintly of salt and smoke. He intends to return home when soft footsteps echo across the bridge. A figure appears, tall and wrapped in a dark cloak. The face behind the silver mask reflects the lantern's glow. The voice is calm, but oddly distant when it speaks. "To son Michele," says the stranger. No greeting, no haggling. Only the name of the island of the dead. The gondolier studies the passenger for a brief second. The mask bears the same shape as the one he found days ago. A bird's narrow eyes, expressionless and elegant. Something in the coincidence unsettles him, yet he nods and gestures to the seat. The figure settles silently, and the gondola pushes away from the shore with a low sigh of water. They drift through alleys that twist like veins under the city. Faint ripples break the reflections of windows above. Occasionally, a torch flares on a passing bridge, flashing crimson against the fog. Venice seems to vanish behind them, swallowed by mist. Only the steady creak of the oar and the drip from its blade pierce the hush. The gondolier's thoughts wander. No one visits San Michele at this hour, unless for reasons unspoken. A secret burial, a tryst with the dead, or guilt heavy enough to demand solitude. He tells himself it isn't his concern. Gondoliers are ferrymen of others' burdens. The water keeps what it hears. Still, unease hums in his chest. Halfway across the lagoon, the fog grows dense enough to hide the nearest ripple. He rows carefully, listening to the compass in his bones, counting strokes. The masked passenger sits unmoving, gloved hands resting on the knees. Not once does the stranger turn to look at the gondolier. The silence weighs like stone, until the oar catches on a loose rope, a quick jerk that snaps the rhythm. "Are you well, signore?" he asks before he can stop himself. A slight nod, nothing more. The voice follows, low and measured. "Go on." He obeys. Still, something in that tone, a fatigue, perhaps regret, crawls under his skin. The night seems to thicken with each pull. When they finally reach the edge of San Michele, the steps of the cemetery emerge from the mist. The gondolier steadies the boat with a practiced motion and looks back to signal arrival. The bench behind him is empty. The air is colder now. Droplets of fog cling to the wood where the passenger sat. "Signore," he calls, though the sound feels swallowed before it can travel. He steps carefully into the boat's middle, glancing toward the shore. The fog moves as if alive, drifting across the marble crosses. No sound answers, not the crunch of boots, not the creak of gate. Only the faint lap of water against stone. On the seat, where the mask had been, lies something else. A dagger, its handle wrapped in lace, the blade dark and sticky. The first thought that strikes him is to cast it into the lagoon. His fingers almost do. Venice is generous to those who forget quickly, and a man can drown his troubles without leaving home. Yet he hesitates. The blade gleams faintly blue where moonlight touches it. Delicate craftsmanship, not peasant's work. He wraps it in his coat and hides it near the rope bolts where no eye will find it. When he looks back toward the island, a swell of fog drifts closer, curling like smoke. It brushes his hand with chill that feels like breath. He pushes off the steps and rows away. The path home is slower, and each dip of the oar seems too loud. Twice he thinks he hears another boat gliding parallel in the mist, though nothing appears when he turns. The lagoon feels wider than he remembers, alive with invisible eyes. By the time he reaches the canals again, dawn already presses pink through the horizon. The city looks half asleep, windows closed, waters still. He moors the gondola behind his lodging, checks once more that the dagger remains hidden, then climbs to his room. His hands tremble as he removes his coat. The lace around the weapon stains his fingers faintly red. He washes them with vinegar and says nothing, not even to himself. The day passes in silence. He works as usual, yet every splash in the canal sounds different, sharper, like question marks dropped into the water. The city hums unaware. Customers come and go. One, a merchant in mourning clothes, mutters about a noble found dead near the Rialto, wounds deep as if carved by a lover's rage. The gondolier's stomach tightens, but his face stays calm. Venice thrives on tragedy. Gossip is cheaper than bread. Still, he wonders if the fog can carry guilt from one shore to another. That night he dreams of the passengers seated once more behind him, face hidden, water reflecting stars. But in the dream the stars flicker out, one by one, leaving only the silver mask. When he wakes, he finds the sound of oars outside his window, steady, rhythmic, then gone. Sleep does not return. Days stretch into a blurred chain. He hides the dagger beneath a plank of his room's floor. The cloth still dampens, now and then, as if refusing to dry. After work he wanders the alleys near the Rialto, pretending not to listen when tavern men speak of the noble's death. Some claim robbery, others revenge for debts unpaid. One swears to have seen a black gondola vanish into mist at midnight. The gondolier drinks quietly, hands folded, gaze on the ripples outside. Once he catches his reflection in the tavern window and hardly recognizes it. Eyes watchful, mouth firmed by secrets. The old kindness is still there, buried under caution, but it no longer softens him. You can learn prudence from hunger, fear from authority, and silence from grief. All three, he realizes, row beside him now. He works fewer night routes, telling others that his oar has worn thin. In truth, he avoids the lagoon after dark. The water changes at night. Those who row know it. It listens closer, echoes longer. Sometimes, when he crosses smaller bridges, he feels a prickle between the shoulder blades, as if the city itself were taking measure. Once, he glimpses a cloaked figure watching from a balcony, still, too still. But when he looks again, the place is empty. A week later, 2 guards stop him near the market. Polite, almost friendly, they ask whether he was on the northern route the night of the carnival's end. He answers truthfully that he was, ferrying a few tradesmen until midnight. Their eyes linger, searching. Then one nods. "Many boats that night," the guard says. "Hard to remember whose floated where." They move on. He rows again, slower, sensing the thread tightening around his quiet life. Even the familiar city now feels foreign. Each echo from a bridge. By habit, he watches the surface of the canal for signs, the patterns gondoliers read like fortune-tellers read palms. Once, near Campo San Giacomo, he sees a streak of red trailing behind another boat, dissolving fast in the water. Paint, he tells himself, only paint. He grows cautious, careful to greet others first, to smile when needed, to be the man of jokes and easy strength they remember. Yet, in private, solitude presses tightly around him. The drawing of the little boat, the one given long ago by his painter friend, seems to look different under the candle now, as if the sketched water hides new depths. Venice, with all its laughter and noise, does not pause for private fears. The bells still announce vespers. The baker still shouts about warm loaves. Life built on stilts above the water, pretends not to see what lies beneath it. The gondolier learns to do the same, though his sleep remains thin. There are evenings, rare but real, when he feels almost at peace again. He rows through canals lit by lanterns, their glow like floating halos. Lovers whisper, merchants curse, priests cross bridges muttering blessings. The smell of roasted coffee and damp rope fills the air. Yet beneath it all lingers an invisible note, the faint scent of blood and salt, carried by memory more than breeze. And still, the dagger rests beneath his floorboards, a question sealed in wood. Sometimes, when he hears rain tapping against the window, he imagines the sound as tiny oars striking water. The lost passenger still rowing somewhere in the fog, heading toward an island that never appears. That thought, strangely, does not frighten him anymore. It feels like something inevitable, a current drawing him forward. What began as another night's fare has reshaped the silence of his days. Venice remains the same, shining on the surface, murmuring in its depths. But the gondolier now sees that nothing truly disappears in water. It only waits. Venice wakes to winter drizzle that blurs its edges like wet paint. Roofs weep into the canals. Laundry hangs motionless under pale light. The gondolier keeps to his routine, though every stroke now feels watched. Days follow one another quietly, yet the rhythm of his oar no longer calms him. Beneath each bridge lurks a pause, that sudden depth where thought slips in. The city hums around him as if pretending nothing happened, but he feels the tremor underneath, like wood soaked too long in salt. Word spreads in whispers. A nobleman found dead near the Rialto, stabbed clean through the ribs with a blade of foreign make. The talk in taverns grows sharp. Some say it was a jealous rival. Others blame robbers from the mainland. A few mention darker things, politics, secrets exchanged for gold, the kind Venice hides under candlelight and wine. The gondolier listens, saying little, though the words settle behind his ribs like stones. That same week, 2 guards appear again at the canal's edge. Their boots gleam with damp, their glances friendly as knives. They ask harmless questions, where he rows at night, which clients he remembers, the kind of inquiries lined with bait. He answers carefully, as taught by years among nobles and markets. Enough truth to sound dull, no more. When they leave, he feels the taste of iron on his tongue. Work continues. Tourists and traders still call for rides, and the gondolier delivers them with quiet skill. Yet he notices faces now. Who looks back? Who avoids his gaze? Venice thrives on observation. Even a boatman must learn to see or be swallowed. One evening, he ferries 2 merchants whispering of debts and court rumors. Their laughter sounds forced, nervous. When they disembark, one drops a folded note by accident. The gondolier picks it up and reads only a phrase before conscience stops him. The dagger must be found. He burns it over the tavern lamp that same night, watching the smoke curl into the damp air. Neighbors begin to pull back. The washerwoman downstairs greets him, but no longer leaves her door open when he passes. One of the gondoliers he drinks with avoids eye contact, muttering that strangers have been asking questions near the arsenal. The gondolier feels the weight of solitude closing in. Familiar, but heavier now, tinged with danger. Still, small acts of kindness keep him tethered. A stray cat follows him on foggy mornings. He feeds it bits of bread and jokes that it guards his boat better than the city's watch. When a seamstress from the next alley faces trouble, accused by her employer of pocketing lace, he hides her in his attic for 2 nights, feeds her soup, and sends her back at dawn with a coin to start anew elsewhere. She never returns, but sometimes in the crowd he thinks he sees her dark braid vanish around a corner, and it gives him comfort. At night, he dreams of the masked passenger again. The voice changes each time. Now, an echo of the noble found dead. Now, his own father's tone telling him to keep balance. Dream and waking blur together. Even his body feels different. The dagger under the floor is no longer a thing, but a presence. Once, during a rainstorm, he thinks he hears a drop of water where none should fall. Lifting the plank, he finds it dry. The imagination of a tired man, perhaps, yet it leaves his pulse unsettled. Business falters as gossip thickens. Customers start choosing younger gondoliers, the kind who sing loudly and speak of nothing but the weather. He does not complain. Pride has no weight against suspicion. To make ends meet, he repairs old oars for the arsenal. Honest work, though it pays in copper. The smell of fresh-cut pine steadies him. Wood has no malice. In the evenings, he sits alone by the small fire, lace-wrapped blade still hidden beneath, wondering whether keeping it was fate or foolishness. The merchant's daughter he once rescued visits again unexpectedly. She stands at the pier, veiled, her eyes uncertain. Her father, she says, grows restless. Men call on him late at night asking for favors, and once she saw a sword brought in a velvet case. She warns the gondolier softly that his name was mentioned among them, though she doesn't know why. He thanks her with a nod, and for a moment they stand quietly, 2 modest souls pressed between worlds of power. When she leaves, the air feels lighter, yet his thoughts heavier. Rumors change shape like tides. Some claim the nobleman's death hides a scandal, an affair, a duel. Others whisper of stolen treasures smuggled by water. Each story replaces the last, and yet in each, something of the gondolier's shadow appears. A faithful servant, a witness, an accomplice. He wonders if truth matters at all in a city built upon reflection, where water doubles everything perceived. Superstitions return. Old gondoliers murmur that the lagoon unsettled its balance, that the dead rise when injustice festers. One night, rowing near the arsenal, he sees a light flickering just above the surface, small and steady. He rows closer, only to find the lamp of an empty skiff drifting with the current, untied. He watches it vanish into darkness and whispers a quick prayer to no one in particular. Still, he clings to routine, polishing the oar, feeding the cat, keeping the blade hidden. Habit is survival. Yet something within him shifts, not guilt exactly, but the weight of carried silence. Venice has many sins. It simply needs someone humble to hold them. Perhaps that is what the lagoon asks of those born near its edges. One rainy afternoon, a messenger finds him, thin and breathless. The city watch requests his presence at the Doge's small council chamber. His stomach tightens. There he meets an officer of quiet manner who questions him about his routes, his passengers, the foggy night in question. The interrogation is polite, almost tender, yet each question folds into another, weaving a net of logic. When asked whether any passenger ever carried a weapon, he answers no, because to say otherwise would drown them both. The officer smiles faintly and releases him. "Venice remembers mercy," he says. The phrase sounds less like comfort than a warning. In the weeks that follow, the gondolier's humor changes. He begins to laugh again, but only at small things. The crooked hat of a drunk fishmonger, the way a gull scolds its reflection. Beneath the laughter hides caution. He learns to survive through lightness. Even the officials prefer a man who jokes. It disarms them. At sunset, he sometimes rows beyond the city's edge, where the tide meets open lagoon. There, the water breathes slower, less burdened by history. He speaks aloud then, not to confess, but to remember his voice. The lagoon answers with gentle slaps against the hull, as if approving. The nights grow colder. Wine cellars add sawdust to their barrels, and every household whispers of scarcity. Venice herself seems tired, her wealth dimming like a candle nearing its wick. In such decay, suspicion becomes daily bread. One morning he finds his door unlatched, the floorboard slightly moved. Nothing taken, but he lifts the dagger to check. The blade remains, sharper than ever, though untended. He wraps it back carefully, this time with an extra layer of cloth. There comes a day when he almost throws it into the canal. Standing by the rail, wind biting his hands, he holds the weapon over the water. But below him the reflection of the city seems to tilt, towers leaning as if watching. He lowers his arms slowly. Venice has seen enough things sink. Some burdens, it seems, must stay above the surface until they find their meaning. That evening, after another long day, he notices a paper folded into the ropes of his gondola. Inside, written in an even hand, "The dead speak through what they leave behind." There is no seal, no signature. He burns it, as before, yet the words stay imprinted in his thoughts. In taverns, music still plays, though softer now. People drink not for joy, but for forgetfulness. The gondolier listens, eyes half closed, fingers tracing the rim of his cup. The ceiling drips slowly. The smell of damp stone blends with smoke. He feels Venice breathing, weary, secretive, unrepentant. Every man carries a chain of deeds, some forged by his own hands, others placed there by unseen forces. His is no heavier than the rest, only better hidden. Outside, fog returns to the canals, thick and patient. The gondolier unties his boat and steps in. Water murmurs under the keel. For a moment, he pauses, watching the mist rise from the lagoon. The sound of the city fades behind him. Bells, laughter, footsteps, all swallowed by distance. He rows forward slowly, the oar's rhythm steady and deliberate. Though the night hides the horizon, he continues, guided not by sight, but by memory of where truth once vanished, and where it may one day reappear. The first warm wind of early spring moves slowly across the lagoon, carrying fragments of song from the markets and salt from the open water. Paint flakes from shutters, bells crack faintly in their frames, and the damp breath of Venice rises again, sweet, heavy, tired. The gondolier rows through mirrored canals where palaces peel their own memories like bark. His oar strokes are practiced now, slower, burdened by years of secrets, but still steady. Those who know him simply call him the quiet one, reliable, discreet, polite. They do not see what lies beneath that calm mirror. The city pretends to have forgotten the murder, yet its shadow lingers in the narrow passages, whispered during late-night drinking or sewn into gossip between laundresses. The gondolier feels it when he rows past the Rialto. Silence heavier there, water darker. The dagger remains hidden under his floorboards. Some evenings, when rain flows through the gutters like veins, he hears faint tapping below, though reason tells him it is only the wooden beams contracting. To occupy himself, he works longer hours, ferrying foreign visitors who photograph the decaying churches or count domes instead of worries. They speak of Rome, Paris, Vienna, cities that, they say, grow brighter each year. Venice, though, glows backward, light folding over ruin. He listens without envy. His city does not need saving. It survives by surrender. One evening, he receives an unusual passenger. She waits under the arch near San Zaccaria, where the lantern flame catches the red folds of her dress. The cloth is simple but finely made. Her mask, gold-edged. Without a word, she steps into the gondola, moves to the back, and sits perfectly still. Her perfume mingles rose and smoke, memory and danger both. When she finally speaks, her voice is low, tired, but commanding. "To the old palazzo by the arsenal," she says. He nods and rows. The water holds them between silence and echo. The city's noises dim with distance. The oar licks the surface in slow rhythm. After many turns, she breaks the quiet again. "They say you rowed for someone on a certain night last winter." The gondolier feels his hands tighten on the wood, but his movements remain even. "Many passengers pass my boat, Signora," he replies. She makes a faint sound, something like a sigh or a laugh. "Yes, so many faces in this city, but some do not return." When they reach the palazzo, crumbling, unlit, its marble worn like bone, she pays him with a silver coin older than his grandfather's birth. Before leaving, she looks back briefly. In the light of the moon, her mask's surface flashes pale, revealing eyes too sharp to forget. Later that week, he sees her again, this time without the mask. The same red dress, though faded by rain. She is standing at a small art stall near San Casan, studying sketches of canals. Each depicts the same object, a dagger resting on velvet beside a hand mirror. The merchant, noticing the gondolier's curiosity, explains that the artist paints symbols of vanity and guilt for church commissions. But when the gondolier glances back, the woman has disappeared into the crowd. In the days after, he catches glimpses of her everywhere, at a window, crossing a bridge, reflected briefly in water where no one stands above. Sometimes she leaves small traces, a red ribbon tied to his mooring post, a folded scrap of paper in his coat pocket, reading, "The twin remains." None of it frightens him. A different kind of dread grows instead, that she seeks the same truth he hides. Another rumor reaches him through the gondolier's tavern. The dead noble had a sister, unconventional, rumored to paint in secret and wander unchaperoned during carnival nights. She disappeared for months and recently returned to Venice. The woman in red fits that whisper too well. He begins to follow her trail discreetly, guided by chance and curiosity. Once at twilight, he tracks her to a decaying palazzo near San Giorgio. Through a broken gate, he sees her lighting candles before a canvas, a half-finished painting of two masked figures on a gondola. One face is turned toward the viewer, the other blurred. He turns away before she can notice him, but the memory clings. His days fall again into rhythm. Morning ferrying merchants, midday rest by the dock, evenings spent wandering alleys that smell of rain and oranges. Yet everything feels tinted red now, as if her color stains the air. He dreams of red cloth drifting across the lagoon, of hands reaching from the water, not pleading, but pointing toward the horizon. Venice, meanwhile, sinks deeper into its own masquerade. Nobles throw feasts, though debts drown them. Priests rail against sin, while gossip of indulgence circulates faster than confession. The poor live, as always, between work and superstition. When thunder breaks over the city, one of his neighbors claims it is the sea demanding tribute. The gondolier, half in jest, drops a stale crust of bread into the water, murmuring, "For silence, not forgiveness." The following evening, as dusk presses gold into the canals, the woman in red appears at his dock once more. She tells him to row toward Dorsoduro. Rain begins halfway through the journey. Narrow drops fall like needles, prickling the dark water. She speaks almost to herself. They never wanted it found. The other blade is still here, waiting to ruin a man or justify a death. He does not answer. She looks at him briefly, eyes weary. "You have something that belonged to him, don't you?" He shakes his head, though the lie feels heavier than any secret before. She seems unsurprised. "Keep it then," she says softly. "It protects its owner only until truth knocks twice." When they reach the steps of her palazzo, she disappears inside without another word. That night, the gondolier cannot sleep. Wind scrapes the shutters, water moans under the stones. He sits at his table, dagger unwrapped before him. Under the candlelight, the blade gleams faint blue, as it had the first night. He examines the handle again and notices a small engraving, 2 letters entwined. He recognizes one, the family crest of the murdered noble. The other letter is a serifed S. He closes the cloth and rewraps it carefully. The city has begun whispering its answers, and he is not sure he wants them. The days turn humid. Markets bustle with returning merchants, and the air smells of rot and perfume. The gondolier hears that the Doge's men have closed the investigation. A scapegoat, a debt-ridden clerk, has confessed under mysterious circumstances. Yet many doubt it. The gondolier understands the city's rhythm too well. Justice often serves appearance before truth. When next he sees the woman, she is unveiled, standing on the terrace above the Grand Canal as evening burns red behind her. Crowds below rush anxiously toward a sermon or supper, unaware that anything passes between them. She drops a small parcel into his boat. "For remembrance," she says, then turns away. Inside lies a folded canvas fragment. a painted reflection of water, and half a mask, sliced clean. On the back she has written, "The second dagger lies where guilt sleeps." That night a storm bursts open the skies. He rows home through driving rain, lightning flashing across domes, the oar heavy as bone. The canals overflow and lick the thresholds of silent houses. When he reaches his room, the wind has blown the door ajar. He steps inside to find the floorboard lifted and the dagger gone. Only the lace remains, twisted like a small ghost upon the wood. For the first time in years, fear returns in full. Nothing was stolen but the blade, yet its absence fills the room like an intruder still hiding in the corner. He moves the candle, half expecting motion, but finds none. Still, he senses presence, not human, but the weight of a thread pulling tight. Morning reveals calm skies. The city dries and forgets. He repairs minor damage to his boat and tells himself what all Venetians tell themselves after disaster. The water gives, the water takes, and man merely drifts between. Yet when he rows past San Michele, he glances toward the cemetery and imagines someone, the woman in red perhaps, or a ghost of unrepentant rank, standing behind those white walls, watching him. Life resumes, appearance intact. He ferries foreigners, delivers packages, jokes once more with other gondoliers. But when silence deepens at dusk, he feels the city vibrating through its own pretense. In taverns, songs of sailors blend with murmurs of unseen things. He begins to understand that the woman in red has tied him to the mystery beyond his will, not through threats or charm, but through recognition, as if she and he share the same burden, to guard what Venice refuses to name. By midsummer the air becomes heavy with decay. Lanterns blur in the haze, algae rise thick along the pilings. The gondolier drinks little, eats sparingly, works long hours to quiet thought. His hands, cracked from salt, still move with stubborn rhythm. But sometimes, when the reflection of the sky ripples red at sunset, he seems to row through memory instead of water. He finds himself murmuring the woman's last phrase, "Where guilt sleeps," and wonders if she meant the island of the dead or the restless city itself. Under this weight of heat and silence, life narrows to motion, breath, reflection. Yet deep beneath, the current shifts unseen, drawing him closer to the truth that began one fog-drenched night and has not yet ended. Venice holds its breath with him, waiting for the sound of the next oar strike that will disturb its fragile stillness once more. Autumn lowers its veil over Venice, turning the lagoon to sheets of mercury. The air tastes faintly of rust and dying lilies. Even the laughter from the squares sounds cautious now, muffled by fog. The gondolier rises each morning before dawn, sharpening his senses to the city's breath as one might tune a fragile instrument. Years of rowing have trained him to read nuances of current and silence, yet of late he feels something unfamiliar beneath the water, a vibration that makes the gondola shiver like a living thing. Since the disappearance of the dagger, the woman in red has not been seen. The city murmurs new scandals every week: a missing priest, an intercepted letter from a foreign agent, a boat found adrift with no owner. Her absence curls around these rumors like thread through cloth. He no longer knows if she was vengeance, temptation, or truth given form. Still, he sometimes thinks he can smell her perfume when the wind cuts in from the east. Rose and smoke, the scent of endings. He continues to work, for what else can a man do? The gondola remains his sanctuary. The weight of its oar steadies his pulse, each stroke a small vow to persist. By habit, he avoids the richer districts, taking simpler passengers, widows heading to market, monks gathering alms. Their small talk feels mercifully empty. Yet one morning an unfamiliar man, dressed as a clerk, hires him for a long ride toward the docks of the arsenal. The clerk folds his hands neatly, glancing often over the water as if expecting pursuit. "They say," he mutters, "that your boat once carried a ghost." The gondolier answers without changing pace. "Venice is full of ghosts, signore. Most of them pay their fare." The man chuckles, then falls silent. When they part, he tips generously, but meets the gondolier's eyes with peculiar respect or pity. A small token remains on the seat, a silver brooch carved in the shape of a dagger crossed with a quill. The gondolier pockets it, uncertain whether gift or message. Later that week, an old friend from the arsenal visits his dock under cover of dark. They had worked side by side in early youth, back when laughter was easy. Now the man's clothes bear the scent of gunpowder and salt. He brings half-truths instead of greetings. "The blade you hid," he whispers, "was not meant for one death. It is part of a pair. The second was forged anew. The first carried a secret, proof of treason." That noble's end silenced more than pride. The gondolier listens, feeling the weight return to his chest. "Then who speaks for justice?" he asks quietly. "Justice has no voice here," the friend replies. "Only witnesses. Living ones are inconvenient." When he leaves, the gondolier remains by the pier, staring into the dim water where the lamps smear gold across the current. He feels again that pulse beneath, steady and patient, as though the lagoon itself waits for confession. That night he rose aimlessly, letting instinct guide him through the vacant canals. The city seems emptied of sound, save for faint tolling from distant bells. The boat glides beneath low bridges, between shuttered houses where whispers have long died out. Then, near San Pietro, he notices another gondola drifting without oar or hand. He approaches cautiously. Inside lies a familiar splash of color, a fragment of red cloth snagged on a seat. Beneath it, a sheet of paper wrapped in oilskin. He lights it with his match, a painting, small and hurried, showing him at his oar, and someone behind him masked, exactly as in memory. But the mask in this version bears blood at the mouth. A chill runs through him. He stows the picture away. The lagoon grows restless under the hull, tiny waves tapping like fingers on wood. In the mornings, news spreads of storms predicted, of ships delayed. The gondolier senses that time itself thickens, each day heavier, as if the city detains its breath for revelation. Inside him grows the certainty that truth will not come through inquiry, but by accident, when silence can hold no more. One evening, the wind turns violent, scattering lanterns across the docks. Thunder rolls from the sea, and fishermen tie their boats with trembling hands. Against all caution, the gondolier pushes out, drawn toward the lagoon's center, where darkness folds over itself. Rain slashes against his face, sharp and cold. The gondola heaves with the current. Visibility shrinks to arm's length. Yet through this blur he sees movement. Another boat, low and heavy, riding the waves ahead. He rows closer, each pull demanding the strength of despair. A flash of lightning reveals a figure inside, clutching a length of silk wrapped around something long and metallic. The eyes that turn toward him belong to the clerk who had hired him days before. The clerk shouts above the thunder, words almost lost. "The second blade! Take it! Before they—" The rest drowns in wind. His hands lift the object high, but at that moment a sudden surge throws both boats apart. The clap of thunder and the roar of water swallow all sight. When the gondolier regains control, the other craft has vanished. Only the silk remains, tangled near his prow. Inside it, a dagger, its hilt carved like the first but unmarred, clean and cold as judgment. He rows back at dawn. The storm retreats behind pale fog, leaving the city shivering under wet silence. Streets gleam like veins. Bodies of small fish glisten in gutters. At home, he unwraps the dagger. Its twinship is unmistakable. He examines the blade's base. A faint engraving. The same family crest, the same entwined letters. He lays it beside the drawing the woman gave him. Together, they form a complete image, a mirror of guilt and innocence. Understanding arrives not like revelation, but like fatigue. The nobleman had been killed not for love or pride, but for knowing too much. A conspiracy between the aristocrats and the foreign powers buying Venice piece by piece. The daggers were copies of a treaty in miniature, forged on twin steel twins for secrecy. One was meant to reach Vienna, the other to remain as proof. The murder silenced a witness. Those who knew, including the woman in red, fled or hid what could not be confessed. Yet what is he to do with truth no one can bear? The gondolier feels the absurdity of it. A craftsman, a ferryman, holding the fate of powerful men in calloused palms. He could sell it, betray it, bury it. None would change the price of his bread or the color of the sunrise. But something within demands resolution. That evening, as shadows gather along the quays, he rows once more to San Michele. The air smells of rain-soaked stone and wilted flowers. The island looms pale, rows of crosses rising like teeth. He steps ashore with both daggers wrapped in the same silk. No priests watch, only the whisper of reeds. He reaches the water's edge and crouches, hands trembling slightly. "Go home," he murmurs to the steel, to the memory, to himself. He hurls them into the lagoon. The surface flares briefly, two circles spreading outward, rippling the reflection of the moon. When the stillness returns, he senses no relief, only a curious calm, as if the burden has shifted from flesh to tide. On the way back, he feels lightheaded, half empty. The city lights emerge one by one, fragile and human. He rows slower than usual, letting silence fill the gaps where fear used to live. Under one bridge, a child's voice drifts, a lullaby about lost ships and faithful water. He cannot see the singer, only the echo. When he reaches his quay, dawn brushes gold across the rooftops. The storm has cleaned the air so thoroughly that even the pigeons seem newly made. The gondolier moors his boat, stretches his aching arms, and for the first time in many seasons feels neither hunted nor alone. Venice, too, stirs gently, as if aware that something unspoken has returned to its depths. A bell rings, not funeral, not festive, simply the hour's honest chime. He lifts his head to listen. The sound moves through him like a promise, weightless, dissolving into the water, leaving only reflection behind. The months that follow bring an uncommon stillness. Venice drifts half awake, clothed in gray mist that hides more than it reveals. Ships move slower through the lagoon, markets echo faintly, and gulls circle in patient silence. The gondolier keeps to his customary path, ferrying the usual faces: artisans with tired eyes, women carrying baskets of fish, young lovers who mistake whispering for secrecy. To these passengers, he remains the same quiet man rowing through a city of vanishing bridges. They never guess that his hands once held weapons capable of shifting history. He tells no one what he has done. The twin blades lie somewhere beneath the water now, becoming part of the lagoon's slow appetite. In time, barnacles will claim them. Weeds will curl around their hilts, and Venice will forget their sharpness. That thought calms him. Yet at night, when the tide laps too close to his window, he hears faint metallic echoes and wonders whether steel ever truly sleeps. Autumn deepens into winter. The gondolier's hair catches threads of silver, though his back remains strong, his arms tuned to the oar. Fog thickens early each evening, blurring street lamps into halos. He finds comfort in that dimness. Venice, shrouded in her own sigh, feels almost truthful under it, stripped of display, humbled to water and sound. Occasionally, he rows to the edges of the city where the lagoon opens without witness and lets the gondola drift until dawn. There, the quiet stretches honest and wide, too large for lies or memory. People speak less of the murder now. Their fears have found new names: taxes, disease, the approaching winter. The woman in red becomes a legend told in taverns, a ghost haunting the bridges, a betrayed mistress, a saint in disguise. Stories change with every telling, as though the city reshapes her to fit its need for mystery. The gondolier listens but offers no correction. Rumors are just another current. One learns to ride them without drowning. His own life settles around small routines. Each morning, he rubs oil on the oar, checking its grain with the care once reserved for secrets. He mends the seam of his coat, feeds the stray cat that returns loyally for scraps, shares wine with neighbors who remember better times. Sometimes children follow his gondola's shadow along the wall, laughing as the ripples distort it. Their laughter reminds him of youth, when the world seemed made of honest labor and daylight. He almost smiles, though a quiet sadness lingers behind the motion. A letter comes one damp afternoon, carried by a boy with a nervous voice. It bears no seal, only a crude sketch of a red ribbon on the outer fold. Inside, a single phrase written in an unfamiliar hand. What has been returned need not be buried. The meaning eludes him. He half suspects it to be another jest from dock workers. Still, the symbol stirs old unease. That night he dreams of the lagoon splitting open, revealing streets of shining metal below, and wakes with the taste of salt on his lips. Days later, wind from the sea drives rain against the city, shaking windows loose. The gondolier keeps to the canals despite warnings, guiding his passengers safely through rising water. He has learned to read storms as one reads faces. Beneath every gust hides purpose. While working near the Rialto, he glimpses a figure on the steps, a woman draped in dark crimson, unmasked, her hair pinned back with a silver clasp. Her gaze meets his only for a heartbeat before she turns and disappears into an alley. Whether phantom, memory, or chance, he cannot tell. That night he finds peace in repetition. To row is to think through movement, to let thought pass like water through an open palm. While gliding near the market lights, he hums an old fisherman's tune, half forgotten since boyhood. The rhythm of his voice and the oar blend, until for a brief moment he feels the same infinite balance that once steadied him as a child. A modest happiness born from precision, not from luck. Venice endures beneath him, sighing through cracks in her foundations. He sees patches of plaster falling from palaces, boats chained to bridges no longer repaired. Yet there is resilience in decay. The people still trade, laugh, gossip. Even the poorest find reason to sing when wine warms them. He has learned that beauty in this city is stubborn. It survives neglect as surely as weeds survive stone. His solitude has grown comfortable, but not empty. A few friends have remained. The old violinist returned to their tenement, bow quivering through slow nocturnes. The washerwoman's daughter, now married to a sailor, sometimes greets him with roses from market day. None suspect the weight he once carried. Their ignorance feels merciful. One foggy morning, he receives an unexpected summons from a small official office near San Marco. The clerk who greets him smiles with detached politeness, asking about a passenger vanished years before, and whether he ever recovered lost property. The gondolier replies with calm precision that he recalls many passengers, but none who disappeared. The official records his answer, signs a note, and waves him away. No accusation follows. The air, upon leaving, feels oddly thin, as though some knot stretched to invisibility has finally come loose. Freedom, he realizes, does not come with proof of innocence, but with the exhaustion of pursuit. No one asks, no one remembers, no one cares to connect a ferryman to a noble's fall. Venice has shifted to other secrets. What once pressed him downward like current now drifts away. Still, he senses how silence becomes its own weight. Some mornings he finds himself speaking aloud, though no one listens, telling the unseen water stories of his youth, the boy painter, his parents' laughter, the promise of ordinary decency that once steered his days. It comforts him to know that words can still float, even when meaning sinks. In the final days of winter, frost thickens along the canal edges, forming delicate white filigree on the boats. He covers his hands with thin gloves, coughs into his sleeve, and rows slower. He feels age approaching not as sorrow, but as shadow, steady, inevitable. Once he feared time as a thief. Now he sees it as a witness, indifferent, yet kind enough to let one fade quietly. The lagoon itself seems quieter, as though respecting his silence. No one speaks of the vanished daggers, nor of the woman in red. The noble's family, long bankrupt, has left Venice. The storm that once raged through his life dissolves into small ripples against the hull. He begins to trust the stillness, though inside he knows all peace in this city is temporary, like calm before another tide. On the evening of a rare, clear sunset, he moors his gondola near San Michele again. The sky glows copper, the water reflects it like a burnished coin. He sits and listens to the faint murmur of distant bells. Somewhere a choir practices, voices ascending through mist. They sing of mercy, not triumph. He finds himself murmuring the same word under his breath, not as prayer, but as understanding. Mercy, he thinks, is what remains when reason has failed and the sea refuses to judge. As twilight settles, he stays by the boat, watching fog rise over the graves on the island. The past has grown quiet there, content to be forgotten. Venice sleeps behind him, its sounds softening into lullaby. He breathes in the salted air and senses with deep certainty that the city itself keeps memory in its water, so that men may let it go from their hearts. When night fully descends, he stands, adjusts the rope, and steps into the gondola. A faint breeze ripples across the surface, gentle as forgiveness. The oar dips once, twice. The current obeys. Without haste, the gondolier rows onward into the dark canal, his silhouette merging with the city's reflections. A single figure moving through endless water, carrying nothing now but his own quiet endurance. Morning begins mist-white and silent. The lagoon lies flat as glass, its thin ripples tracing invisible maps that only the old gondoliers can read. Venice wakes slowly, cautious not to disturb itself. The first bells carry across the water like distant conversation. A soft wind stirs laundry along the balconies, arranging fleeting flags of human life above this motionless mirror. The gondolier opens his shutters and lets pale air into the room. He has lived in this quarter long enough to know how the light grows here, first silver, then honeyed, then golden. Each transformation touches the city differently, revealing age as an ornament, not decay. He moves slowly now, deliberate in every gesture. Years of work have left their marks. Creases along the wrists where rope once burned. Shoulders shaped by the oar's rhythm. Yet the strength remains, tempered rather than dimmed. He begins the day as always, polishing his gondola, checking its rope and iron prow. On the bench beside him sits a young apprentice, a boy recently orphaned, brought from the mainland by an uncle too poor to feed him. The gondolier, without quite deciding, has taken him in, teaching what can be taught: silence, balance, patience with water. The boy watches him carefully, imitating every motion. "Listen before you row," the gondolier says quietly, his voice carrying the low rasp of age. "The lagoon tells you more than sight will." The boy nods, uncertain, but his curiosity glows clear. They push off as the fog begins to lift, the boat sliding from the shadow of the quay into open reflection. The morning's first rays press light across the city's facades, soft yet bright enough to show that every crack in the plaster has a story. The gondolier feels no weight on his chest anymore, though memory lingers like tidewater between stones. He has made his peace with what the sea claimed. Secrets sink better than men. Both vanish if left long enough. The city has rewritten his past into rumor, and rumor fades faster than sound. Still, he has not forgotten. Forgetting is a luxury of those who have never stood at the meeting point of guilt and mercy. They drift past the market where vendors set up their stalls. The smell of lemons, tar, and bread mingles in the rising sun. The gondolier buys the boy a coil of rope from an old friend, explaining the art of knotwork. "Every knot," he says, looping the strand deftly, "has its reason. Some hold you fast, some let you go. The trick is knowing which to use." It is as close to wisdom as he can offer. As the day brightens, they turn toward the open lagoon. San Michele stands visible across the glimmering plain, white walls floating between water and sky. The gondolier has not been near it since that night years ago when fog swallowed his course and fate rearranged his life. Now, seen in pure daylight, the island appears gentler, its cypresses swaying like quiet guardians. He steers the gondola closer, and the boy falls silent under the spell of stillness. When they reach the shadow of the cemetery walls, the gondolier rests his oar. They float without motion. The sound of the sea sighing through the reeds fills the space between breaths. In that silence, he feels not fear, but remembrance. Of those who labored unseen, of those who spoke truth too late, of that one mysterious woman whose fate remains a rumor even to him. The memory does not wound anymore. It settles softly as dust on a sunlit floor. He tells the boy stories while they wait, his voice steady and reflective. Tales not of politics or death, but of small truths, of learning to steer in narrow channels, of music carried perfectly across water, of the boy painter he once knew who said, "Venice changes shape each day." Perhaps, the gondolier muses, we row not over water but over time itself, and every stroke rewrites the past a little. The boy listens, eyes wide, as a gentle wind nudges the boat. The gondolier resumes rowing. Each stroke echoes quietly, folding one world into another, present into memory, solitude into companionship. By midday, the sun burns away the last mist. The water gleams blue-green, spotted with gold where reflection of domes trembles. They glide between anchored boats, passing fishermen asleep under nets, old women dipping hands into clean tide, dogs barking from doorsteps. The city lives in fragments, yet together they make a pulse no silence can conquer. Venice breathes, even in ruin. The gondolier senses that enduring rhythm, and gratitude settles in him like warmth spreading from within. At the quay near San Giorgio, they pause again. The boy begins asking about distant places, Milan, Rome, lands beyond where rivers do not taste of salt. The gondolier smiles faintly. "Travel if you must," he says, "but remember, wherever there is reflection, there is Venice. The world carries her in its brightness and its rot alike." The apprentice nods, half understanding, lulled by the even sway of the boat. The gondolier watches him and thinks of his younger self, the boy who once carved tiny hulls from scrap, who believed hard work could keep sorrow away. He feels no regret, only recognition, as if all those years had conspired to bring him precisely here, to this morning, this pupil, this quiet. They return through narrower canals, where the sound of footsteps crosses faintly from bridges above. The gondolier waves to familiar faces, a baker's wife leaning from her window, a priest feeding a stray pigeon. Once, secrecy shaped his life. Now, transparency soothes it. He greets each person without caution. Even the city's decay seems kinder, its crumbling walls glinting as though polished by centuries of acknowledgement. As evening falls, the apprentice helps him tie the gondola. They sit on the pier, sharing the last of their bread. Sunset folds across the horizon, painting the lagoon in copper and violet. Bells from a distant monastery begin to toll. Echoes ripple through the air until they seem to vibrate from the water itself. The gondolier feels the oar's calluses beneath his palms, the ache of the day in his limbs, the softness of twilight upon his face. It occurs to him that a man cannot choose what stories claim him, only how gently he holds them afterward. He closes his eyes a while. The sounds of the city, the sigh of ropes, the chatter of gulls, the faint hum of a violin far away, weave together until they resemble a single breath. When he opens them, night has begun to unfold. The apprentice, already drifting towards sleep against the pier, murmurs a wish to row to the stars. The gondolier gazes at the constellations mirrored upon the water. For the first time in many seasons, they appear clear, steady, unbroken. He sets his hat upon his knee and stays that way for some time between reflection and sky. There is no triumph in his peace, only understanding that every current, no matter how dark, carries its own light once accepted. Beside him, the boy dreams soundlessly, and the lagoon glimmers as if cradling both past and future in the same slow heartbeat. Over the far roofs, dawn begins again, soft, patient, spreading warmth where shadow clings. It touches the water, the gondola, the worn face of the man who has lived his story to its quiet end. He smiles to himself and grips the oar once more. The blade dips, the water answers, and light travels outward from San Michele, rippling through Venice like forgiveness made visible.